Marcus Williams stood behind the woman at the ATM, checking his phone for the third time in 2 minutes. The machine was taking forever, and he was already running late for his construction job. The woman in front of him wore simple jeans and a plain white t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She seemed to be having trouble with the machine, pressing buttons repeatedly and muttering under her breath. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely, stepping closer. "Is everything okay? Sometimes these machines can be tricky." The woman turned around, and Marcus was struck by her tired eyes and gentle smile. She looked to be in her early 30s, about his age, with a kind face that seemed familiar somehow, though he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. "I'm sorry for holding up the line," she said softly. "The machine keeps telling me there's a daily limit issue, but I really need to withdraw some cash for groceries." Her voice carried a slight accent that Marcus couldn't identify. Marcus noticed she was holding a food stamp card in her other hand, and his heart went out to her. He recognized the look of someone struggling to make ends meet. He'd been there, himself, plenty of times, especially since becoming a single father 5 years ago, when his ex-wife abandoned him and their 2-year-old son, Tommy. "Here, let me try something," Marcus offered, pulling out his own card. "Sometimes if you use a different bank's card, it resets the system. You can pay me back whenever you can." The woman's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. "I couldn't possibly ask you to do that. You don't even know me." "My name's Marcus," he said with a warm smile. "And you don't have to pay me back right away. I know what it's like to stretch every dollar." He inserted his card and withdrew $40, handing it to her without hesitation. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes as she accepted the money. "Thank you so much. I'm Elena. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can. I just started a new job and my first paycheck hasn't come through yet." Marcus waved off her concern. "Don't worry about it. We all need help sometimes." He paused, studying her face again. Something about her seemed so familiar, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. Elena clutched the money tightly. "How can I reach you to pay you back?" Marcus pulled out his phone and they exchanged numbers. As Elena walked away, she turned back one more time. "Your kindness means more to me than you'll ever know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, Marcus was helping 7-year-old Tommy with his homework when his phone buzzed, with a text from an unknown number. It was Elena, thanking him again and promising to repay him soon. Marcus smiled and showed the message to Tommy. "Who's that, Dad?" Tommy asked, looking up from his math worksheet. "Just someone I helped today," Marcus replied. "Remember what I always tell you about being kind to others? That kindness comes back to you in ways you never expect," Tommy recited dutifully. Marcus ruffled his son's hair. "That's right, buddy." What Marcus didn't know was that Elena had spent the rest of the day thinking about their encounter. There was something about the way he'd helped her without hesitation, without judgment, that reminded her of someone very important in her past. Someone she'd been searching for across 3 different states over the past 5 years. As she tucked her own child into bed that night in their small apartment across town, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the kind stranger who'd helped her. She'd been so focused on his generosity that she hadn't really looked at him closely at first, but now, replaying the encounter in her mind, certain details were starting to surface. The way he smiled, the gentle tone of his voice, even the way he stood, it all seemed achingly familiar. That night, Elena pulled out a worn photograph from her wallet. It was the only picture she had left from 7 years ago, taken during happier times. She stared at it for a long time, her heart racing with possibilities she barely dared to consider. Could it really be possible? After all this time, after all these years of searching, could fate have brought them together at a simple ATM? Elena made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she would find a way to see Marcus again. She had to know for sure. The $40 he'd given her was nothing compared to what she owed him, and what she'd been trying to give him for the past 5 years. As both Marcus and Elena lay in their beds that night in different parts of the city, neither could shake the feeling that their lives had just taken a dramatic turn. but only one of them suspected the incredible truth that would soon unfold. 3 days passed before Elena worked up the courage to reach out to Marcus again. She'd spent those days conducting her own quiet investigation, driving past the construction site where he'd mentioned working, trying to catch another glimpse of him. Each time she saw him from a distance, her heart pounded harder. The resemblance was too strong to be coincidence. Finally, she sent him a text message. "Hi Marcus, it's Elena from the ATM. I was wondering if you'd like to meet for coffee. I'd love to properly thank you for your kindness." Marcus was surprised by the invitation, but pleased. There had been something about Elena that had stayed with him over the past few days. Maybe it was her genuine gratitude, or maybe it was the sadness he'd seen in her eyes that reminded him of his own struggles. They met at a small diner downtown on Saturday afternoon. Elena arrived first, choosing a corner booth where she could watch the door. When Marcus walked in, wearing a clean flannel shirt and jeans, Elena's breath caught in her throat. Up close in better lighting, there was no denying what her heart had been telling her for days. "Elena," Marcus called out, spotting her and walking over with a genuine smile. "You didn't have to do this, you know." "Yes, I did," Elena replied, her voice slightly shaky. "Please sit down, I have something I need to tell you." Marcus slid into the booth across from her, noticing how nervous she seemed. "Is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elena took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Do you have a son?" Marcus's expression shifted to surprise and slight wariness. "Yes, I do. Tommy. He's 7. Why do you ask?" "What's his full name?" Elena pressed, her eyes never leaving his face. "Thomas Michael Williams," Marcus replied slowly. "Elena, what's this about? You're starting to worry me." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she continued. "Does Tommy ever ask about his mother?" Marcus stiffened. "How could you possibly know about that? Who are you?" With shaking hands, Elena reached into her purse and pulled out the worn photograph she'd been carrying for years. She slid it across the table to Marcus. "Do you remember this picture?" Marcus picked up the photo and his world stopped. It was a picture of him and a woman, both laughing, taken at a carnival 7 years ago. The woman in the picture was younger, her hair different, but it was unmistakably Elena. In the background, barely visible, was a pregnancy test sitting on a table. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered, his face going pale. "Isabella? But you left. You disappeared without a word." "My name was Isabella then," Elena said quietly. "I changed it when I had to start over. And I didn't leave, Marcus. I was taken." Marcus stared at her in shock. "What do you mean, taken?" Elena wiped her eyes with a napkin. "My family found out about us, about the pregnancy. They didn't approve of our relationship. They thought you weren't good enough for me because you didn't come from money. So they forced me to disappear. They told me if I ever contacted you, they would make sure you lost your job, your apartment, everything. But the baby," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. "I had her, Marcus. We have a daughter. Her name is Sophie, and she's 7 years old, the same age as Tommy." Elena's tears were flowing freely now. "I've been searching for you for 5 years, ever since I finally broke free from my family's control. I've been working minimum wage jobs, living in tiny apartments, trying to find you and our daughter." Marcus felt like the world was spinning around him. "Wait, what do you mean, our daughter? Sophie isn't with you?" Elena's face crumpled. "My family took her from me when she was 2. They said I was an unfit mother because I wouldn't stop looking for you. They have money, lawyers, influence. They got custody, and I've been fighting to get her back ever since." "Your family has money?" Marcus asked, still trying to process everything. Elena nodded miserably. "More than you could imagine. But I walked away from all of it to find you and our children. I've been living like you saw me at the ATM because I chose love over money. I chose you over luxury." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "Isabella, Elena, I can't believe this is real. All these years I told Tommy, his mother, had died because I couldn't bear to tell him the truth, that I thought you had abandoned us. Never, Elena said firmly. I would never abandon you or our children. Every day for the past 5 years, I've been trying to find a way back to you both. Marcus squeezed her hand tighter. What about Sophie? Where is she now? She's with my parents in California. They've been raising her as their own daughter, telling her that I'm dead. Elena's voice broke. Marcus, she doesn't even know I exist. And she doesn't know about Tommy either. The magnitude of the situation began to sink in for Marcus. His son had a twin sister he'd never met, and the woman he'd loved and lost was sitting right across from him, having sacrificed everything to find them again. We have to get her back, Marcus said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Elena looked at him with hope for the first time in years. It won't be easy. My family, they're very powerful. But now that I've found you, maybe we have a chance. What neither of them knew was that Elena's family had been watching her movements, and their reunion was about to set off a chain of events that would test their love and determination in ways they never imagined. The next few weeks were like living in a dream for Marcus. He and Elena spent every free moment together, sharing stories about the years they'd lost and slowly rebuilding their relationship. Elena got to know Tommy, who was initially shy but quickly warmed up to the woman his father clearly cared about. She's nice, Dad, Tommy told Marcus one evening after Elena had helped him with his homework. She smells like cookies and she's really good at math. Marcus smiled, watching Elena wash dishes in his small kitchen. She'd been staying in a motel, but she spent most of her time at their apartment. It felt natural, like she'd never left, except for the shadow of their missing daughter that hung over everything. Elena had been making phone calls to lawyers, trying to find someone who would take on her powerful family. Most turned her away when they heard the Castellano name, her real family name that she'd hidden from Marcus. The Castellanos owned hotels, restaurants, and real estate across the West Coast. They had the kind of money that could make problems disappear and keep people quiet. Any luck today? Marcus asked as Elena hung up from another disappointing phone call. Elena shook her head. 3 more lawyers said no. They're all afraid of my family's reputation. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Marcus, maybe I should tell you something. My family isn't just wealthy, they're complicated. My father, Vincent Castellano, owns half of San Francisco's downtown district. When I say they have power, I mean real power. Marcus sat down across from her. Are you saying you're rich? I was born rich, Elena corrected. But I walked away from all of it. I haven't touched a penny of their money in 5 years. I've been working as a waitress, a cleaning lady, whatever I could find. She looked around his modest apartment. This life, with you and Tommy, this is what I want. Not penthouses and private jets. But Sophie, Marcus said quietly. Sophie is living like a princess, Elena said bitterly. Private tutors, expensive clothes, a mansion in Malibu. They're giving her everything money can buy except the truth about who she really is. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about the situation. His son deserved to know his sister, and Elena deserved to have her daughter back. But how could a construction worker from Detroit fight against billionaires? The answer came in an unexpected way. The next morning, while Tommy was at school, Elena's phone rang. The caller ID showed her sister's name, Victoria. Don't answer it, Elena said to Marcus, staring at the phone. She only calls when something's wrong. But the phone kept ringing, and finally Elena picked up. Isabella, thank God, came Victoria's panicked voice. You need to come home right now. I'm not coming home, Victoria. We've been through this. It's Sophie, Victoria said urgently. She's sick, really sick. She's in the hospital and she's asking for her real mother. She somehow found out the truth about you. Elena went white. What do you mean she's sick? What happened? She collapsed at school yesterday. The doctors think it might be her heart. Isabella, she needs you. Dad is furious, but even he knows Sophie needs her real family right now. Elena looked at Marcus, who had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. He nodded immediately. We're coming, Elena said into the phone. We? Victoria asked. Sophie's father is with me, and her brother. We're all coming. There was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Victoria spoke. Isabella, you found him? After all this time? His name is Marcus, and he's been taking care of our son while your family kept me from my daughter, Elena said firmly. We'll be there tomorrow. After she hung up, Marcus took her in his arms. We'll figure this out, he promised. Sophie needs her real family now. Elena nodded, but she was terrified. Marcus, you don't understand what you're walking into. My family will try to destroy you. They'll dig up everything about your past, your finances, your job. They'll try to prove you're not good enough for me or the children. Let them try, Marcus said confidently. I love you, and I love our children. That's all that matters. What Marcus didn't know was that Elena's family had already started investigating him the moment Victoria called Elena. Private detectives were already looking into his background, his finances, his credit score. They were preparing for war. But they weren't prepared for what they would discover about the humble construction worker who had captured their daughter's heart. Because Marcus Williams wasn't just any construction worker. He was a former Army engineer who had turned down a high-paying corporate job to stay close to his son. He was also the son of a woman who had died, leaving him a small inheritance that he'd invested carefully over the years. Most importantly, he was about to walk into their world, not as a poor man begging for scraps, but as a father, fighting for his family. And that made him far more dangerous than they could imagine. As Elena packed the few belongings she had, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Sophie was sick, and the thought of losing her daughter before really getting to know her again was unbearable. But she also knew that bringing Marcus into her family's world was like throwing a match into gasoline. The Castellanos had no idea what was coming their way. The flight to Los Angeles was Tommy's first time on an airplane, and under different circumstances Marcus would have enjoyed watching his son's excitement. But all he could think about was the daughter he'd never met, who was lying in a hospital bed, and the family that was waiting to judge whether he was worthy of his own children. Elena gripped his hand tightly as the plane descended. I need to warn you about my father, she said quietly, making sure Tommy couldn't hear. Vincent Castellano is not a warm man. He's used to getting his way, and he's never been told no by anyone who matters to him. He's going to try to intimidate you. I've dealt with tough guys before, Marcus replied, though he was nervous. The important thing is Sophie. Everything else we can figure out later. They were picked up at the airport by a black limousine that made Tommy's eyes go wide. Dad, are we rich now? He whispered. No, son, Marcus said firmly. We're just visiting. Some rich people. The driver took them straight to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where Elena's family was waiting. The moment they walked into the private waiting room, Marcus felt the temperature drop 20 degrees. Vincent Castellano was a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit who looked like he could buy and sell people for breakfast. Next to him sat an elegant woman who could only be Elena's mother, and a younger woman who must be Victoria. Isabella, Vincent said coldly, not getting up from his chair. You look different. Elena lifted her chin. Hello, Father. How is Sophie? Your daughter is stable, Vincent replied, emphasizing the word your in a way that made it clear he still considered Sophie his. His eyes moved to Marcus and Tommy. And these would be your friends? This is Marcus Williams, Elena said, stepping closer to Marcus. Sophie's father. And this is Tommy, Sophie's twin brother. The silence in the room was deafening. Vincent's eyes narrowed as he studied Marcus from head to toe, taking in his simple clothes and calloused hands. Mr. Williams, I've heard a great deal about you. I'm sure you have, Marcus replied calmly. I'd like to see my daughter now. Your daughter? Vincent repeated slowly. Mr. Williams, Sophie has been my daughter for 5 years. I've paid for her education, her medical care, her clothing, her food, her... What exactly have you contributed to her life? Marcus felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice steady. What I've contributed is irrelevant, since I didn't know she existed. Your daughter kept that information from me. My daughter, Vincent said, standing up to his full imposing height, was protecting you from a responsibility you were clearly not equipped to handle. Dad, stop it, Victoria interrupted, standing up as well. Sophie is awake and she's asking for Isabella. She heard the nurses talking and she knows her mother is here. Elena's mother, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Isabella, darling, you look so thin. Are you eating enough? I'm fine, Mother, Elena replied, though Marcus could see the pain in her eyes at her mother's concern. Can we please see Sophie now? Vincent checked his expensive watch. Dr. Morrison will be here in 10 minutes to explain her condition, then you can see her briefly. Briefly? Marcus stepped forward. She's my daughter. I'll see her for as long as she wants to see me. Vincent's eyes flashed dangerously. Mr. Williams, I don't think you understand your position here. This is a private hospital room that I am paying for. Sophie is legally my ward. You have no rights here whatsoever. Actually, I do, Marcus said quietly. I've done my homework too, Mr. Castellano. Sophie was never legally adopted by you. Elena never signed away her parental rights, which means I never lost mine either. So legally, you're just a grandfather who's been babysitting. Elena looked at Marcus in surprise. When had he learned all this? Vincent's face turned red. You think you can come into my world and make demands? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? A man who stole my daughter and lied to her about her real family for 5 years, Marcus replied calmly. Yeah, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Before Vincent could respond, a doctor in scrubs entered the room. Mrs. Castellano, I'm Dr. Morrison. Sophie is asking for her birth mother quite urgently. We think seeing her might help with her recovery. Elena stepped forward. I'm her birth mother. Dr. Morrison looked confused, glancing between Elena and the elegantly dressed woman he assumed was Sophie's mother. I'm sorry, there seems to be some confusion. There's no confusion, Elena said firmly. I'm Isabella Castellano, Sophie's biological mother. This is Marcus Williams, her biological father, and Tommy, her twin brother. Dr. Morrison's eyes widened as he looked at Tommy, then back at Elena. Twin brother? But Mr. Castellano, you never mentioned... Because he didn't know, Marcus interjected. We were separated when the children were babies. We just found each other. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. Well, this explains a lot. Sophie has been asking very specific questions about having a brother. She said she's been having dreams about a boy who looks just like her. He looked at Tommy, who was staring wide-eyed at the adults around him. Young man, would you like to meet your sister? Tommy looked up at Marcus, who nodded. Yes, sir. I've been wanting to meet her my whole life. Vincent Castellano watched in growing fury as his carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. He'd spent 5 years convincing Sophie that her mother was dead and that she had no other family. Now, in the space of 10 minutes, his lies were unraveling. This isn't over, he said quietly to Marcus as they prepared to follow the doctor to Sophie's room. You're right, Marcus replied, meeting his gaze steadily. It's not. But it's going to end very differently than you planned. As they walked toward Sophie's room, Elena squeezed Marcus's hand. How did you know all that legal stuff? Marcus smiled grimly. I called a lawyer friend of mine during the flight. Turns out you don't need money to fight rich people, you just need to be right. What none of them knew was that Sophie had been awake for the past hour, listening to the voices in the hallway through her door. She had heard her grandfather's angry voice, a man's voice she didn't recognize, and most importantly, a voice that sounded exactly like her own dreams. The voice of the brother she'd always felt was missing from her life. For the first time, in 5 years, Sophie Castellano was about to meet her real family. The moment Elena walked into Sophie's hospital room, time seemed to stop. The little girl in the bed looked exactly like Tommy, but with longer hair and Elena's dark eyes. Sophie had been staring at the door, and when she saw Elena, her face lit up with recognition. Mama? Sophie whispered, her voice small and uncertain. Elena burst into tears and rushed to the bedside. Yes, baby, it's me. It's your mama. Sophie reached up with weak arms and Elena carefully hugged her daughter for the first time in 5 years. I knew you weren't dead, Sophie said into Elena's shoulder. I knew Grandpa was lying. You smelled just like my dreams. Behind them, Marcus watched with his own tears falling freely. Tommy stood beside him, staring at his sister in amazement. Sophie, Elena said gently, pulling back to look at her daughter's face. There's someone very special I want you to meet. She gestured for Marcus and Tommy to come closer. Sophie's eyes went immediately to Tommy and she gasped. You're the boy from my dreams. You're my brother. Tommy stepped forward shyly. Hi, Sophie. I'm Tommy. I've been waiting to meet you my whole life. Me too, Sophie exclaimed, trying to sit up but wincing in pain. I drew pictures of you. Grandma has them hidden in her room because Grandpa said I was being silly, but I knew you were real. Marcus approached the bed slowly. And I'm your daddy, Sophie. My name is Marcus. Sophie studied his face carefully. You have the same eyes as Tommy, and the same smile. She reached out a small hand toward him. Why didn't you come to find me before? Marcus took her hand gently. Because I didn't know where you were, sweetheart. Your mama and I got separated when you and Tommy were very little. I've been taking care of Tommy and your mama has been looking for both of us. Are we going to be a family now? Sophie asked hopefully. Elena looked at Marcus, who nodded. Yes, baby. We're going to be a family. From the doorway, Vincent Castellano watched the reunion with growing desperation. He could see that Sophie was genuinely happy for the first time in months, but he couldn't bear the thought of losing her. She had been the light of his life since Isabella left. Sophie needs her rest, he announced loudly, entering the room. The doctors said short visits only. Sophie's face immediately changed when she saw her grandfather. Grandpa, why did you tell me my mama was dead? Why did you say I didn't have a brother? Vincent's face softened as he looked at his granddaughter. Despite everything, he truly loved her. I was trying to protect you, sweetheart. I thought it would be easier. Easier? For who? Sophie asked with the blunt honesty of a 7-year-old. It wasn't easier for me. I was sad every day because I missed my mama and my brother. Dr. Morrison entered the room with a clipboard. How is our patient doing? Much better, Sophie said brightly. My real family is here now. The doctor smiled. I can see that. Your heart rate has actually improved significantly since they arrived. Sometimes emotional healing is just as important as medical treatment. Vincent seized on this. Doctor, given Sophie's delicate condition, don't you think it would be better if she had minimal stress? Perhaps these visits should be limited. Actually, Mr. Castellano, Dr. Morrison interrupted. Sophie's condition has been puzzling us. Her heart is physically fine, but she's been exhibiting symptoms of severe depression and anxiety. Frankly, I think being reunited with her biological family might be exactly what she needs. Elena stepped forward. Doctor, what exactly is wrong with Sophie? Her heart is healthy, but she's been having panic attacks that mimic heart problems. She's been asking repeatedly about having a twin brother and wanting to see her real mama. The staff thought she was delusional, but clearly she wasn't. Tommy moved closer to his sister's bed. Sophie, do you want to see pictures of our house? And my school? You could come to my school too if you want. Sophie's eyes lit up. Really? We could go to school together? Every day, Tommy promised. Vincent could see his control slipping away with every word. Now wait just a minute. Sophie's education is already arranged. She has private tutors. The best money can buy. I don't want private tutors, Sophie said firmly. I want to go to school with my brother. I want to have friends and be normal. Normal? Vincent scoffed. Sophie, you're not normal. You're a Castellano. You have responsibilities, expectations. She's 7 years old, Marcus said quietly, but his voice carried a warning tone. Her only responsibility should be being a kid. Elena sat on the edge of Sophie's bed. Sophie, what do you want? If you could have anything in the world, what would it be? Sophie didn't hesitate. I want to live with you and Daddy and Tommy. I want to go to regular school and have regular friends. I want to eat dinner together every night and watch movies and play games. She looked directly at her grandfather. Grandpa, I love you, but I don't want to live in the big house anymore. It's lonely there. Vincent's face crumpled. But Sophie, I've given you everything, the best of everything. You gave me things, Sophie said gently. But Mama and Daddy and Tommy, they're my people. They're the family that goes together. At that moment, Victoria entered the room. Dad, we need to talk. Now. Her face was pale, and she looked worried. Not now, Victoria, Vincent said dismissively. Yes, now, Victoria insisted. The lawyers are here, the ones representing Mr. Williams. Marcus looked surprised. I didn't call any lawyers. Victoria looked confused. But they said, they're from Williams, Patterson and Associates. They said you're their client. Elena gasped. Marcus, do you know what that means? Marcus shook his head, genuinely confused. Williams, Patterson and Associates is one of the most powerful law firms in California, Elena explained. They only represent billionaires and celebrities. How could you possibly afford them? Before Marcus could answer, two men in expensive suits entered the room, followed by a woman with a briefcase. Mr. Williams? The older man asked. I'm James Patterson. We need to speak with you immediately. It's about your inheritance. Marcus stared at him. What inheritance? The one your mother left you 20 years ago. The one that's been sitting in trust, earning interest, waiting for you to claim it. Patterson smiled. Mr. Williams, you're not a poor construction worker anymore. You're worth approximately $47 million. The room went completely silent. Vincent Castellanos' face went white as he realized that his daughter hadn't fallen in love with a poor man at all. She'd fallen in love with someone who was now rich enough to fight him on equal terms. Elena looked at Marcus in shock. You're rich? Marcus sat down heavily in a chair, staring at the lawyers. I don't understand. My mother died when I was 18. She didn't have any money. She had a life insurance policy and some investments you didn't know about, Patterson explained. She set it up so you couldn't access it until you were 35, or until you had children who needed it. Since you now have two children who need stability, the trust can be released immediately. Sophie clapped her hands together weakly. Does this mean we can be a real family now, Daddy? Marcus looked around the room at Vincent's stunned face, Elena's hopeful expression, and his two children waiting for his answer. Yes, sweetheart, he said firmly. We're going to be a real family. But Vincent Castellano wasn't done fighting yet. The next few hours were a whirlwind of legal documents, medical consultations, and family confrontations. Vincent Castellano had retreated to make phone calls, clearly plotting his next move, while Elena, Marcus, and the children stayed with Sophie in her hospital room. So let me understand this correctly, Elena said as they sat waiting for the lawyers to finish their paperwork. You've been living in a tiny apartment, working construction, struggling to pay bills, and all this time you had millions of dollars sitting in an account. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. I had no idea. Mom never mentioned any of it. I thought the small amount I inherited was all there was. He looked at the legal documents the lawyers had left with him. Apparently, she worked 2 jobs for years and invested every extra penny because she wanted to make sure I'd be okay if something happened to her. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, Elena said softly. She was. She would have loved you, and she would have adored the kids. Marcus watched as Tommy and Sophie whispered together, already inseparable despite having just met. She always said family was the only thing that really mattered. Dr. Morrison returned with Sophie's discharge papers. She's physically fine to leave anytime. The panic attacks were definitely stress-related, and being with her family has worked better than any medication we could have given her. Can we go home now? Sophie asked hopefully. I want to see Tommy's room and meet his friends. Before anyone could answer, Vincent Castellano returned with his own team of lawyers. His face was grim but determined. I'm sorry, but Sophie won't be leaving with you, Vincent announced. I've filed for emergency custody based on abandonment and neglect. Isabella left her daughter for 5 years, and Mr. Williams never even attempted to find his child. Elena stood up, her face flushing with anger. I never abandoned Sophie. You forced me away and threatened me. You'll need to prove that in court. Vincent replied coldly. Until then, Sophie stays with me. Marcus stepped forward, and for the first time since arriving in Los Angeles, his voice carried real authority. Mr. Castellano, I think you should know that my lawyers have already filed counter motions. We're seeking full custody based on your interference with parental rights and emotional manipulation of a minor. Vincent scoffed. You think having money makes you my equal? I've been fighting legal battles since before you were born. Maybe, Marcus said calmly. But you've never fought a parent who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. He sat down next to Sophie's bed and took her hand. Sophie, sweetheart, your grandfather wants you to come live with him again. What do you want to do? Sophie looked around the room at all the adults watching her. Despite being only 7 years old, she seemed to understand the weight of the moment. I want to stay with my real family, she said clearly. Grandpa, I love you, but you lied to me. You made me think my mama was dead and that I didn't have a brother. That made me very sad for a very long time. Vincent's expression softened. Sophie, I was trying to protect you. From what? Sophie asked innocently. From being happy? From having a mama and daddy and brother who love me? She shook her head. I don't want to be protected from love anymore. Elena's mother, who had been quietly watching from the corner, finally spoke up. Vincent, perhaps it's time to stop fighting. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. She rarely contradicted her husband. Margaret, Vincent said warningly. No, Vincent, I've watched. Our granddaughter struggled with depression and anxiety for 2 years. I've seen her draw pictures of the brother she insists exists and ask endless questions about her real mama. She's been trying to tell us what she needed, and we wouldn't listen. Margaret Castellano approached Sophie's bed. Darling, are you sure this is what you want? Living with them won't be the same as living with us. You won't have your pony or your big bedroom or your private beach. Sophie considered this seriously. Will I have my mama and daddy and brother? Yes, Margaret replied. Then I don't need the other stuff, Sophie said simply. Tommy doesn't have a pony and he's happy. Tommy grinned at his sister. We have something better than a pony. We have each other. Margaret smiled for the first time since Elena had arrived. Isabella, are you sure you can take care of both children? Financially, I mean. Elena looked at Marcus, who nodded. Mrs. Castellano, between Marcus's inheritance and my determination to be the mother I should have been 5 years ago, our children will have everything they need. What about what they want? Vincent asked desperately, making one last attempt. Marcus stood up and put his arm around Elena. They want what every child wants. Parents who love them, stability, and the chance to just be kids. Money can't buy that, Mr. Castellano. Trust me, I know. I've been rich for exactly 4 hours now, and I'm the same person I was this morning, when I was poor. Elena looked at her father, and for the first time in years, her voice was gentle when she spoke to him. Dad, you can still be part of Sophie's life, both children's lives, but as their grandfather, not as their guardian. Let us be their parents. Vincent looked around the room at his family. His wife was nodding encouragingly. His daughter Victoria was watching him with hopeful eyes. Sophie was holding hands with both her parents and her brother, looking happier than he'd seen her in months. Finally, his shoulders sagged in defeat. What kind of arrangement are you proposing? Marcus answered. Sophie and Tommy spend summers with you, Christmas and spring break too if they want to. But they live with us during the school year. They get to be normal kids, go to regular school, make friends, and you get to spoil them rotten when they visit, Elena added with a small smile. Just like grandparents are supposed to do. Sophie clapped her hands. Does this mean I get to go home with Mama and Daddy and Tommy today? Doctor, Morrison stepped forward. Medically, she's cleared to travel, but I'd recommend staying in Los Angeles for a few more days just to be safe. Elena looked at Marcus. We could get a hotel room? Nonsense, Margaret interrupted. You'll stay at the house. All of you. Vincent looked at his wife in surprise. Margaret, Vincent Castellano, you've been stubborn enough for one day, Margaret said firmly. These are our grandchildren, both of them, and this young man is going to be our son-in-law whether you like it or not. Elena's eyes widened. Mama, Marcus and I haven't talked about... Marcus turned to Elena, taking both her hands in his. Actually, I've been thinking about that. He dropped to one knee right there in the hospital room, pulling a simple ring from his pocket. Isabella Elena Castellano, 7 years ago I loved you with everything I had. 5 years ago I thought I'd lost you forever. 3 days ago you walked back into my life and made it complete again. He looked at both children, who were watching with wide eyes. Will you marry me? Will you help me raise our amazing children and build the family we always dreamed of? Elena was crying too hard to speak, so she just nodded vigorously. Is that a yes? Marcus asked with a grin. Yes. Elena laughed through her tears. Yes, yes, yes. Sophie bounced in her hospital bed despite her IV. Are we really going to be a family now? We already are a family, Marcus said, standing up and slipping the ring onto Elena's finger. We have been since the day you and Tommy were born. We just got separated for a while. Tommy looked at his grandfather, who was watching the celebration with mixed emotions. Grandpa Castellano, will you come to our wedding? Vincent looked at his grandson, a boy he'd never met until today, but who was already calling him Grandpa, and felt his heart melt completely. I wouldn't miss it, he said quietly. 6 months later, Elena and Marcus were married in a small ceremony in Detroit, surrounded by both families. Sophie and Tommy walked down the aisle together as ring bearer and flower girl, both wearing matching smiles that lit up the entire church. Sophie had enrolled in Tommy's school and quickly became one of the most popular kids in 2nd grade. She told everyone who would listen about her brother Tommy and how they used to talk to each other in dreams before they found each other in real life. Tommy discovered that having a sister was even better than he'd imagined. Sophie was smart, funny, and shared his love of building things with blocks and Legos. Elena went back to school to become a teacher, determined to help other children who might be struggling like Sophie had been. Marcus used part of his inheritance to start a nonprofit organization that helped reunite separated families, knowing firsthand how devastating and unnecessary such separations could be. And Vincent Castellano, who had fought so hard to keep his family together, finally learned that sometimes the best way to hold on to the people you love is to let them choose their own path to happiness. Every summer, Sophie and Tommy spent 2 months in California with their grandparents, where they learned to ride horses, swim in the ocean, and appreciate the finer things in life. But every August, they were eager to return home to Detroit, where they could just be regular kids with parents who loved them and a life built on something more valuable than money. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and Elena and Marcus sat together in their modest but happy home, they often marveled at how a chance encounter at an ATM had led to the reunion of their family. Elena would laugh and say that fate had a sense of humor, bringing a billionaire's daughter and a millionaire construction worker together at the exact moment when they both thought they had nothing. But Marcus always corrected her. They had never had nothing, he would say. They had love and hope and 2 incredible children who needed them to find each other. Everything else was just details, and in the end, the love of a family proved to be worth more than all the money in the world.